Hello and welcome to Watch Me Scrap with Lynn from Lynn Grieveson Designs. Today I'm going to be showing you how I scrapped this favourite photo of my daughter at the beach here in New Zealand. And I actually scrapped this page last week for her chronological album that I'm working on. I'm doing an album of the photos from when she was 4, and I used the photo on this page here, and I just loved it so much I thought that I'd make another page with it and also use it to show how I tweak the photos to make them pop on the pages, to make them work with the colours and so on. I actually usually have several albums on the go, and two of the ones I'm working on at the moment is, like I said, her chronological album from when she was 4, and then I also have what I call my random albums, or my chocolate box albums, because you never quite know what you're going to get when you turn the page, which are just sort of random favourite photos that I scrap. And then when I've got maybe 50, 60, however many of them, and I get a Shutterfly coupon, then I get them printed and they go on the shelf, and they're some of my favourite albums. So this is going to be in that random album. So I've got a 12 by 12 canvas here that I've created, and I'm going to try and recreate this page here for you to show you the process that I go through. And the photo I'm going to be using is this photo here, which, as you can see, is a bit dull. It was a very bright day, but she was sort of shaded. It was taken with a sort of fairly early digital camera and a fairly novice photographer who pretty much just, used it as a point and shoot. So, although it's a fabulous photo and really captures her, it does need tweaking to stop it being quite so dull. So first of all, I'm going to use a white paper base, and the paper I'm using is from my Not Quite White collection of background papers, which is a really good thing just to have in your stash for when you want to have just a plain white background. I'm just going to pop that onto there. And then I'm going to use some of the papers from my new, and elements in fact, from my new Not Quite White set, which is part of the Build Your Own collection for September at the Lilypad. So there's a pack of elements, a mega pack of elements, and a mega pack of papers, and also probably after the first week of BYOC they'll be available as a kit as well. So if you're watching this later, you may find that when you go to the store you can buy them together as a kit with an alpha and that, but at first, if you're buying them as part of the Build Your Own collection, they're available separately. And there's lots of colourful papers, fun papers in the paper pack, as you can see. Some florals, some wild all over patterns. But what I'm going to be using is this one here. So I'll just close these down. And pop this on, and in actual fact I think from memory what I did is I put the white paper on the front. Just get rid of that so I can see what I'm doing, and I put it about there, I think, from memory. I'm not going to try and be exact. Now, the photo. So I shall grab my frame, which is part of the element pack, pull it on over here, and I'm just going to make it so that it's vertical rather than horizontal. Now I don't think I was quite right there actually, so oh no, actually it's about, there you go. I should just put 90 up there for the thing, but perfection is not always what you're after. Now I'm going to be clipping a photo underneath this, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a new layer here, and I'm actually going to make my own clipping mask simply by making a rectangular marquee under the photo, filling it with just a solid colour layer, and then when I drag the photo on I can get it to fit without having to muck around sort of selecting and deleting the bits that are over the edge or anything like that. So I'm just going to make sure that that layer is the one that's active in my layers palette, and I'm just going to drag the photo over. Let's close that down, and using my Alt key, holding down my Alt key, clip like magic, and it takes the shape of the photo layer that I wanted. Now I'm just going to work out how I had this, which I think was slightly bigger. And that'll do. Right, so as you can see, very dull photo. Everything else on the page is going to pop and the photo would just be lost. It would be the least eye-catching thing on the page, which is the opposite of what you want. So, first of all, I'm going to brighten it up. Now, there's a couple of ways I could do this. I could just go image adjustment brightness contrast and do it that way. But another way to do it is to just duplicate that layer and then go over to your blend modes, which is, you'll find them under here where it says normal. You just click the drop down arrow there and for the drop down menu, and you get all sorts of different options that have all sorts of different effects, but the one you want if you're wanting to lighten your photo and brighten your photo is screen. And there you go, just like that, it's much brighter. It's actually a little bit too bright. You're losing a little bit in the background, so I'm just going to take it down a little bit. There you go. And I use Command E to merge down. Now, I still want that to pop a little bit more, so I'm just going to duplicate that layer again, and I'm going to put it on soft light, which brings out the contrast, just makes it a little bit sharper and brighter. But again, I'm going to take it down a little bit, and Command E, merge it down, and I'm going to go in with my dodge brush, which is up here. You can find it and make it a little bit smaller, and I'm just going to get in here and brighten her up again, and brighten her dad's face up a bit, just so that you can see her face. There you go. And I'll make it a little bit smaller, and a little bit smaller yet. He's not small, but he is far away. Alright, there we go. Great. So now you can see her, and the photo is popping. I might actually, yep, that's right. And another little thing I did, just playing around when I was thinking, oh, is there anything else I could do, was I duplicated it yet again, and I put it on, from memory, a colour burn. Yes, I did. Trim it down a little bit, just so it's about there. Then I got a nice soft brush to use as an eraser, quite big, and I took out nearly all of that layer because I just wanted to have just that bit down the bottom where it's kind of brings out the shininess of the sand, and it almost looks like glass down there now. So there we go. I think I probably had it a little bit lighter in the original, but there we go. One problem that you do sometimes introduce, I mean, it makes it a bit grainier, but it's a sort of a balance between that and making sure that you can actually see who you want to see in the photo and that it's actually popping that bit more. There we are. Now I want to have this photo and photo frame as all one layer, so then I can add a shadow to it. So I'm just going to select them all here. I could have gone Command E then again. And so now I've got the photo with the worn edge frame around it to make it look like I've literally scanned an old photo. And I'm going to add a drop shadow to that. There you go. Now, as you can see on this page here, the shadow is a lot bigger and it's a lot more pronounced. It looks like the photo is actually lifting off the page. So to do that, I'm going to make that shadow its own layer. So I'm going to go into layer style and I'm going to go create layer, and there you go. I've got that shadow is now its own layer. And then there's a couple of ways of doing this. You can do warp, edit, transform, warp, and it gives you these control handles, and you can just pull on those and you can see now the shadow is peeking out from behind the photo. Let's see how that looks. Great. Okay, now it's actually that shadow is actually not quite dark enough, but also it was a bit sharp. So I'm going to go here to filter, blur. I'm just going to blur. There you go. Blur that shadow. So it looks a bit more realistic. It's a little bit big now, so I'm going to go up here to my smudge tool. Make it a little bit bigger. I'm just going to tweak that a little bit. So there's nearly always more than one way of doing something in Photoshop. So you can use the transform tool, but if you want more sort of precise areas, then you can get in there with the smudge tool as well. So there we go. Now for the fun part, for the dressing up part, which is always lots of fun. And one of my favourite things to do is to use the paint transfers, which are in nearly all of my kits actually now, and just use them to peek out from underneath the photo, just like that. And instantly you've taken it up a notch. And you've added that dimension to the page. You've got something that's underneath it. It looks like you've got some paint, and I'm just going to duplicate that by going Command J and then V for the move tool. And I'm going to pop it up here because I had it up there as well. There you go. Great. And then some of the elements from the kit, some torn paper, just pop it up here, and that needs a layer too. So I'm just going to do the thing again. I'm going to go to layer, layer style, create layer, bam, now I've got a drop shadow layer, and I'm just going to use my smudge tool just to lift it off the page, just that little bit, get in there. Again, it's a bit dark, a bit light, that shadow, so I'm just going up here to fill, make it a little bit darker, and maybe a little bit more blurred, but not that much because I don't want it lifting off as much as the photo. There you go. Pop on my flower. Whoops, it hasn't gone quite where I wanted it to go, so I'm just going to bring it to the front, which, as you can see, there's lots of shortcuts for doing these things, but it's a little bit big, so I'm going to grab the handles at the corners, hold down my shift key, and that means that when I resize it, I was going to show you what happens if I don't. If I just try to resize it, but you can see it loses its proportions. We don't want to do that. What we want to do is we want to make sure it stays with the same proportions, just slightly smaller. So there you go. Just going to make a slightly bigger shadow. Okay. And a postage stamp, which is another of my favourite embellishments. And just going to pop that under there. So I think I need to and most of the embellishments that you get nowadays in digital scrap kits don't come with shadows. It used to be that often when you got them years back, that they would come with shadows, but then people would say, oh, I don't like that shadow, or it doesn't work for my page, or you've got you're mixing elements from different kits, so some shadows are going one way and some shadows are going another way. So now generally when you buy digital elements, they come unshadowed and you have to add your own shadows to them. But what I like to do with some elements, and particularly when I do these little paper cut out banners, is to provide them with a shadow and without a shadow, so that people have the choice. They can use them with the shadow if they want to just drag it, drop it on. It makes life much easier, but you've also got the option if you just want one that's flat and doesn't have a shadow and you want to add your own. So I'm just going to make that a bit smaller because I like tiny little elements sometimes. So that's about right. Whoops, that was my mistake there. I didn't click the tick before I moved on to something else. It's amazing how no matter how many years you've been doing this, you still do silly things at it sometimes. Right, okay. And another of my favourite elements are leaves, either realistic leaves or painted leaves, or as in this case, die cut leaves with colourful patterns inside. And I'm just going to pop this onto here. There you go. And again here I did played around with the shadow. So I had a drop shadow on it. Create the layer. I already know that that's not going to be big enough, so whoops. That's another trick. You've always got to make sure that because when you create the layer, you still stay with the original layer active, so then you start warping and you realize you're warping the actual thing, not the shadow, which is another trick that always catches me out. So I'm just going to blur that shadow just a bit. And then I'm going to use my warp tool, and I'm just going to get in here and I'm just going to lift these leaves off the page. There you go. And I might just make it a little less. I go up to the fill and I'll just make it a little less dark. There you go. And then a glass button. Great. Okay. So that was my page done, apart from a title. And I usually do include titles in my element packs and kits. And if you look at the Quiet Life elements, you'll see that there's an awful lot here. There's My Time, Just This, and Perfect. There's actually about 6 titles in there, but they're not all shown on the preview. But they didn't quite fit for this page, for a beachy page. And also I wanted to pull out some more of these reddishy browny tones. So I decided to do a sticker title, which is a really quick and easy way to title a page. It's fun, and you can sort of make a title which fits the page perfectly, but just looks a little bit more finished than just a standard type journaling title. So first of all, I grabbed the colour, and I did that by using my colour picker tool, which is up here, and I got the colour. That was the colour I wanted. I just thought I'd make it just a little bit poppier. So there you go. And then I got my text tool, and I already know here what font I'm using, which is Bodoni small caps. So I'm just going to here. Right. I'm pretty sure I must have had it bold when I did it. Oh no, it was bold. There you go. So there's my title, which I could just leave it like that, like I said, but it doesn't really fit with the rest of the page, which has got some fairly realistic sort of edges and dimensional type elements. It just looks a bit flat. It's very clearly just sort of been placed on the page. So to make it a little bit more realistic, and just to add that bit more dimension and to make it pop against the page, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go here to my selection tool. I'm going to make sure it's the layer that's selected, and I'm just going to click outside it, and then oops, I just realized right now, there so goes. That's what happens when you don't concentrate on what you're doing and you're trying to talk. There you go, that's better. There so goes. You were watching that and thinking, wondering how long before I realised that, weren't you? Right. Okay, now selection tool, and select outside the title, and then I'm going to invert that selection by going Shift Control I, and now I've got that layer selected. And this is so that I can do the white stroke around it. You could just put a stroke on it, but I prefer using this way. So I'm going to create a new layer just by going down here and hitting this create a new layer. I want it to be underneath, and I'm going to extend that, and it's usually a bit of trial and error as to how big you want that sort of sticker edge to go. I'm going to go 9, and then I'm going to get some white. I'm just going to pop that, whoops, in there. Now, when I did this on the page, I immediately realized that what I hadn't done was I hadn't also selected inside this 0. I'll just take this selection off so you can see. But having done that, I realized that actually I quite liked that. I could work with it. So what I did was I got a little heart brush. I'll show you it here. And I popped it in the middle of the O just for a bit of fun. And I actually think I'm actually going to go back a bit there because I'm not sure that I quite like, just gonna, whether that sticker edge is quite big enough. Just go back up here. Let's just put a shadow on it and see. Yeah, I can live with it now, but I think probably I would make it slightly bigger if I was doing it again. And then I just got another font, which is Jellica Gare de Chambon, which is one of my favourite journaling fonts, and I had that underneath. And there you go. That's how I made that page. Except, from memory, I think I forgot one step on which was a colour overlay on the photo. So let's just see what happens when I do that. There you go. That just blues it up a bit, so I'll just show you what that does. Brightens a little bit more. Makes the blues just a little bit bluer. There you go. And I do that just by going to adding a colour overlay down here on the effects, and just picking a colour and then popping it on, and it just tends to make the photos pop a little bit. It brings out the blue tones slightly. It's actually just a grey. I could go really blue. Whoop, whoop. I could go for a vintagey look. There you go. I could go way pink. Not sure about that, but no, I'll stick with a slight bluey grey just to make the photo pop a bit. And there you have it. That's how I scrap that page. Thanks for listening. Bye.